Pay for your soul, my son.
What's it going to cost?
Looks like we're out of land, Reverend.
It's all right, bully. Come on.
Just close your eyes.
It's not a bad idea, eh?
That's not an idea.
It sure beats the alternative.
Vamos, caballeros!
Here we go.
God have mercy!
That sort of ripped off from Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid a little bit, I think. I was glad to see those characters disappear like that in the film. And when I saw the beginning of that scene, the hangman scene, I knew that his friend was going to be the hangman. It was that kind of predictable movie with no explanation, of course, of why he got there, how he was able to do it. Nate and Hayes, I suspect, was a very expensive production. Lots of different locations, spectacular stunts like that. And yet its script, the essence of the movie, is awful, almost non-existent. And Tommy Lee Jones, he never gets into character. He's a fine actor, but he comes across here more as a country singer than a pirate. And Michael O'Keefe, who played the padre there, the hangman, that fine young actor, he played Robert Duvall's son in The Great Santini, he's awful here too. He seems so contemporary. And when two good actors stink in the same picture, well, you know it's the picture's fault. Nathan Hayes is just awful.
I'd like to pick up on the word contemporary. The people in this movie do not sound like they live in the 19th century.
Yes.
They're talking to each other like 20th century game show guests, you know, with little asides and, you know, kind of putting each other down and so forth. The second thing is, the movie never finds a style. Either it could have been a thriller, or it could have been a comedy. Push this movie a little further, and it could have done for the South Pacific what Young Frankenstein did for Monsters, but it never does that.
Oh, they don't have imagination.
It just sits around limply, never really delivering on anything.
Yeah, one action scene after another.
You're right. Next at the movies, a teacher finds out that one of her students is a male dancer at one of those strip clubs for women.
3, 2, 1, blast off!
Our next movie is named A Night in Heaven, and the heaven in the title refers to one of those nightclubs where the strippers are all men and the customers are all women. The movie stars Leslie Ann Warren as a college speech teacher who flunks one of her good-looking young students, and then a few nights later, her sister takes her to this strip club disco combination, and she realizes with a shock that one of the performers in jockstraps is this same guy that she had in class. Here's a scene that involves a little embarrassment when she introduces the young man to her husband.
Oh, hello, I'm Patty, Faye's sister.
Oh, hi, how are you? Nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you. I'm sorry. This is my husband, Whitney Hanlon. This is Ricky Rocket.
Oh, Monroe.
Monroe. Of course it's Monroe.
Hi.
How do you do?
Looking all over for you.
Oh, hi. This is Tammy, this is Mr. and Mrs. Hanlon, and...
Patsy.
Patsy.
Hi.
Oh, my right, sir. Yeah, I've got to go. It's good meeting you, sir.
Pleasure meeting you.
Go? Where are you going?
Oh, a friend of mine just got fired, so I'm trying to get him a job dancing with me on the strip circuit.
Dancing on the strip circuit.
Yeah, I'm dancing my way through school. It pays the bills.
And you're very good at it, too.
Thank you.
I'll bet.
You should see him in heaven.
It was nice seeing you, Mrs. Hanlon.
Nice to see you, too.
What he picks up on there is that you don't shake hands with two hands with a stranger, so he notices that. But there are so many things in this movie to notice that you would absolutely have to be blindfolded to make it through the first 15 minutes without catching on. That's if you're in the movie. If you're in the audience, you catch on even sooner than that. That was Christopher Atkins as the young man, and you might remember him from The Blue Lagoon, where he exhibited some of the same talents that he exhibits in this film. In A Night in Heaven, he does a pretty good job of playing the student, and the chemistry between him and Leslie Ann Warren really does work. But what is this movie about? There are all sorts of subplots dangling everywhere. For example, Warren's husband quits his job in the space program because he won't build missiles, but then he begins to feel insecure and sexually inadequate. And the Atkins character sometimes acts sincere, and sometimes he just acts like a stud on automatic. The movie keeps acting like it's about to make a serious statement, but only the sex scenes really work. And the ending is a really confusing anti-climax. It doesn't settle anything. It leaves you thinking that maybe half of this movie was cut out at some point, and that all sorts of loose ends shouldn't have been left dangling.
That's exactly my reaction. I understand that the film switched from one studio to another, and it only runs about 80 minutes, and so something had to be cut. It was written by Joan Tewksbury, a fine writer who wrote Nashville, and she also wrote Old Boyfriends, another movie. And I have a feeling it would be very interesting to see what her original script was. It certainly had to be more interesting than this film. You're quite right. The relationship between the kid and the woman, it's very interesting and moving, and you feel for this repressed woman who wants to let herself go. And you sort of feel for the husband who's lost the job. But that side is really never developed. I don't know what this movie is about, actually.
Serious things that are never brought around. One thing about the ad...
all you get is the sex scenes. That's what I want to say.
One thing we ought to say about the ad is the ad makes it look like this is a male version of Flashdance. And you have Christopher Atkins looking out of a newspaper page at you, and right next to him, seen from behind, is a female figure that looks exactly like Jennifer Beals in Flashdance. There was no female dancer in this movie, so it's really kind of a low blow on the part of the advertising.
Yeah, I think this movie was recut to feature the sex scenes.
You're right.
Okay. Our next film is a bit of a surprise in quality and subject matter. It's The Big Score, an urban crime drama nicely directed by and starring Fred Williamson, one of the few black actors able to make his own movies these days. We haven't seen a picture like this in a long time, almost a decade. It's a throwback to pictures like Shaft and Cotton Comes to Harlem. Williamson plays one of three big city detectives chasing down a drug deal, and like most action heroes, when there's a problem in catching a crook, well, Williamson finally does it by himself.
Smells good. I assume it's all here. I can't understand why you guys pick a dilapidated place like this to do business. The window! It's going down the street.
That almost has a nostalgic feeling. I haven't seen a picture like that. We've been up in outer space too long with the movies.
The good old days of 70s violence.
Yeah, I like it. Nail them in the street. The Big Score sets up its story very well. The money from the drug deal is not recovered, and Williamson ends up spending the rest of the movie trying to find it and erase the suspicion that he may have stolen it himself. In the department, they think he may have done that. The Big Score runs out of gas at the end. I think it also could use a stronger, more credible villain. But it's a decent enough movie, nice gunplay. Williamson is certainly a very strong screen presence, and singer Nancy Wilson has an interesting cameo role. So, a mixed review for The Big Score. It's okay.
You know what's amazing is not long ago on this program we were talking about 3 into 2 won't go, which was this, or was it 1 into 2 makes 3, or something like that. Fred Williamson's last film, which is one of the most inept, amateurish, awful, terrible stinkers of the week that we've ever had. And then he turns around
and directs
this. He directs this, he produces it, he wrote it, he co-wrote it, he stars in it, and it's a really slick, professional little thriller. It's entertaining. It held me. It's not a great film, but it's okay.
Some people said that the reason that the black movie died was that some of them weren't very professional, and so even the customers for those films felt they were getting ripped off. This is a first-class production. I'll grant it that.
Okay, next at the movies, Jack Nicholson, Deborah Winger, and Shirley MacLaine in a bittersweet love story that sweeps all the way from Texas to Nebraska.
I'd like to get to bed early.
Grandma!
Our next movie is named Terms of Endearment, and I think it's one of the very best, funniest, most touchy, most intelligent movies that I've seen in a real long time. It's based on Larry McMurtry's novel about a dozen years in the life of a mother, a daughter, and the men in their lives. And the mother is played by Shirley MacLaine. She's sort of a sweet and goofy widow who lives alone in Houston, Texas, where her next-door neighbor is a wild, alcoholic former astronaut who conducts a parade of one-night stands through his bedroom until finally, after all these years, he gets around to propositioning Shirley MacLaine. The astronaut is played by Jack Nicholson.
I'm starving. No hidden meaning in that remark.
Well, would you like an oyster?
No. Thank you.
Sure.
Well, I think that is extremely rude. Noticing other women when you're with me.
I think we're gonna have to get drunk.
I don't get drunk, and I don't care for escorts who do.
You got me into this, and you're just gonna have to trust me about this one thing. You need a lot of drinks.
Jack Nicholson is just fabulous in this movie. He's one of the few actors around now that all he has to do is give you that wicked smile with his eyebrow going up, and you know something's going on. The relationship between Nicholson and MacLaine in this movie is really funny, but it's not handled only in a comic way. There's something really touching in the way these two people learn to accept each other from totally opposite poles of the human spectrum. Meanwhile, MacLaine's daughter, played by Deborah Winger, has married a college English professor, and she's gone to live in Iowa first. Later they go to Nebraska, and she thinks her husband may be cheating on her.
You wouldn't try to look so innocent unless you were guilty.
You're gonna have to take my word for it. You have no other choice.
Excuse me.
Emma, you always get a little paranoid in your first few months, okay? Just...
If you are doing something, and you're trying to make me feel crazy because I'm bearing our child, then you may have just sunk to a point so low that you will never recover. You may have just panicked, Blab. In trying to save yourself, you've thrown out your character and your principles. Now, the only way you could possibly redeem yourself and be the man that God intended you to be is to admit to me anything that you might have been doing last night. Because if you don't do that right now, you are a lost man.
Now, the fascinating thing about that dialogue is that it's kind of tongue-in-cheek, and yet at the same time it's totally serious. And that's the same thing with this whole movie. It has a really nice control of tone in which it can be funny and it can enjoy these people, and at the same time, at the end, there's a really serious and important payoff. And that, by the way, was Jeff Daniels as the husband. Now, I don't want to reveal too much of the plot of this movie because it has a very important plot development that flows so naturally out of the material, I think you almost have to experience it for yourself. I don't want to spoil it, but I will say the Terms of Endearment has a lot of the complexities and contradictions and surprises of real life. I recognize these people. We see these people growing and learning, taking chances and making mistakes, and we get to know them during good and bad times, during funny times, and during tragic times. This is a wonderful movie.
I agree with you. Most movies are about one thing, one relationship. Will it work or not? You've got three things going on here. You've got Nicholson and Shirley MacLaine. You've got Deborah Winger and her husband, and you've got MacLaine and Winger, their relationship. All three would have been the subject of most movies. This movie, everything is exploding in front of us, and we see lots of life and lots of lives. I'm impressed by the performances. Shirley MacLaine just doesn't work enough. It's a delight to see her. She was, last time I guess, was Being There, and we saw her. I think she she just doesn't work enough. She's delightful
that
here.
Change of Seasons picture, too, that was a real disappointment. Remember that? Yeah.
And then she doesn't have to work so often. But I'm saying that this is a really interesting performance because you see, there are a lot of matrons around in the world, and we don't get movies made about them. We get movies made about older men, not women like that. Fascinating character.
The two women in this movie are two of the most admirable and unforgettable women that I've seen in the screen for a long time. And the scene where the two women get together and talk about their sex lives and share things that they had never shared before is so wonderful. And there's just scene after scene of that where you recognize people you've known or people you've imagined or even people that you've been. This is an extraordinary picture.
You know, we dump on TV people a lot, TV directors. This movie is a first-time directing jobs by a guy named James L. Brooks, who was one of the creators of the Mary Tyler Moore Show and Taxi. And I'm impressed how he is able to juggle all of these stories at once and get such rich performances by three of our finest actors.
I think on the basis of this film, he goes right on the first team.
Okay. Coming up next at the movie is a film that tries to find a parallel between the French Revolution and present-day Poland.
Madame Butterfly was never meant to sound like that. She was meant to sound like this. But when my nose is stuffed up, nothing performs better than Dristan long-lasting nasal spray.
Dristan goes to work immediately, breaking through congestion to open up swollen nasal membranes so you can breathe freely all day.
Dristan long-lasting. Nobody knows my nose better.
Dristan Long Lasting contains the longest-lasting nasal decongestant you can buy, or Dristan Regular.
Remember when you first got your microwave oven? Remember all the fun you couldn't wait to have with it? Well, wait no more. Because now there's Pillsbury microwave popcorn, frozen for freshness. From your freezer to your face in less than 5 minutes. Watch. Pillsbury microwave popcorn pops right in the bag. Now open it up and have yourself some really fresh, great-tasting popcorn. Pillsbury microwave popcorn. It's in your grocer's freezer to keep it fresh.
Andrzej Wajda's Danton, a film by a Polish director about the years after the French Revolution, when the very men who had liberated France from its tyrannical king faced a new threat, themselves. A group of former revolutionaries led by Robespierre now want to control the nation on their own terms. They want to become the dictators themselves. And suddenly, they begin limiting the freedom of their brothers in revolution, including Danton, the people's hero who writes for a newspaper critical of the new government. Here, Danton has a key confrontation with Robespierre.
Il n'est pas bon que les mêmes hommes gouvernent trop longtemps.
Tu rêves du pouvoir?
Je n'ai pas en rêvé. Je l'ai. Le pouvoir, je l'ai, le vrai, le seul pouvoir, la rue. Parce que moi, la rue, je la comprends et elle me comprend. N'oublie jamais ça, n'oublie jamais.
Moi, je ne l'oublie pas. Toi, n'oublie pas de ton côté que pour faire enfin le bonheur de la rue, je ne reculerai devant rien.
Tu veux faire le bonheur de la rue? Et tu ne sais même pas ce que c'est que le peuple? Qu'est-ce que tu connais du peuple? Rien! Regarde-toi! Tu bois pas de vin, t'as les cheveux poudrés. À la vue du DTP, tu t'évanouis. Et il paraît que t'as jamais baisé une femme, alors! Au nom de qui tu parles? Tu veux faire le bonheur des hommes et t'es même pas un homme! Ah!
That was Gerard Depardieu as the barking Danton. He's a terrific actor in so many films that come to this country from France. This is a beautifully mounted movie, quite believable, especially for a costume drama. And if there's one category of film that I usually don't like, it's the costume drama. This one's quite convincing. It's a terrific history lesson, in fact, showing the ways in which power corrupts and the way people can be forced farther apart through their egos than is necessary. Because this film was made by a Polish director, the comparisons with present-day Poland are obvious, with Danton representing Solidarity leader Lech Walesa and with Robespierre representing the Polish general Jaruzelski. But Danton is a much better film than even that. It applies to all governments, to all governors who forget that their job is to serve the people. And in that way, Danton is a timeless movie.
You know, I was reminded of the famous statement of a Hollywood studio head about 50 or 60 years ago when he called all of his producers in after 3 historical dramas had flopped, and he said, "Don't send me any more pictures where the men wear wigs or write with feathers."
Yeah, I know.
And usually I agree with you. When I see these pictures, I am so distracted by all of the trappings that I can't get to the people. In this film, it's sweaty, it's grimy, it's close to the earth. It's like any revolution. It's like 1968 in the streets of Chicago or last year in Poland, and you can identify with these people right down to the last moment.
It's also beautifully done with an opening and closing that are bookends for this film of a little boy reciting the rules of the revolution. to, at the end, Robespierre, and it crushes him. It crushes him. This is a movie where we see, quote, the bad guy realize that he's bad, and it means something to him at the end.
It means something to him for 2 months, and then he went to the guillotine too.
Right.
So at least it was a little lesson for him. Now let's take another look at the movies we reviewed on this show. We both vote thumbs down on Nate and Hayes, the confusing and ridiculous pirate movie. 2 more thumbs down on A Night in Heaven, a movie with a lot of interesting beginnings but no follow-through. And another agreement on the big score, Fred Williams' new thriller that is surprisingly well made. And 2 big thumbs up for Terms of Endearment, a great new movie starring Deborah Winger, Jack Nicholson, and Shirley MacLaine. And 2 more thumbs up for Danton, the exciting film about the French Revolution. So I'd say of all of them, Danton, yes, and Terms of Endearment, certainly yes.
Absolutely. And I'm glad to see Jack Nicholson. He's one of our biggest stars take a small role. He's one of the few big stars who does that. He's great for it.
But very important.
Great. That's it for this week. Next time, we'll be back with the reviews of 5 new movies, the first big holiday films, including Barbra Streisand in Yentl, a musical set in an East European ghetto. That's next time, and until then, we'll see you at the movies.